Welcome, Sylvia, to this to this episode of short term, high impact discussions. Would
Thank
you
you,
like
Arya.
to say a few words about who you are?
Can indeed. So I'm Dr. Sylvia Murphy-Tighe, and I'm a midwifery lecturer at the University of Limerick. And as a midwife and as an educator, I have a long-standing interest in the area of birth trauma. So as a researcher, being involved in this network has been invaluable. It has created national and international links for me. Um, but what it really has done, I have found, has assisted me in my role as an educator. So to be able to provide the best available evidence to our midwifery students at the University of Limerick. And that really is one of the goals of, the cost action is around building and sustaining research in this really important area that is impactful on, mothers, infants, and indeed growing families.
Thank you, brilliant. So, what was the challenge that actually led to this specific field of interest for you?
Um, so I was well acquainted with Professor Joan Lawler and was invited to participate in the network, and I was delighted to do so. Um, my area of interest as a midwife, really, and as a public health nurse, meant that when I worked clinically, I encountered women who were experiencing mental or psychological distress as a result of birth related trauma. And indeed, my PhD on the area of concealed pregnancy also exposed me to women who had experienced adverse childhood experiences or who had experienced adversity in their lives or early trauma. And that type of interpersonal trauma actually played out in their birth experience. And so that, I suppose, clinical experience, along with my research experience, led me to find this as a very valuable network to become involved with. And so it has been a fascinating journey over the past 3 years to learn. And I suppose what I've really learned is that actually there is so much more to know and to learn about, the importance of the interventions and the standard and the quality of interventions that are used to support women at their time, at this time after, during and after childbirth, and how we can do things better into the future.
So, from the narratives that you have uh, been acquainted with during all these years, what were the descriptions or the narratives of the birthing women or fathers or families or the whole system that participates in the welcoming of a new child? What are the adversities that they speak about?
Um, so the adversities would have been varied, and so some women may have experienced, anxieties. Some women and families may have experienced, a phase of depression or struggling. And I suppose, you know, having a baby really does turn a family upside down, and there is that normative crisis in terms of coping and adaptation. Um, but for some, it really had an impact on the relationship with the mother, her partner, perhaps, and the infant. And, as a community public health nurse, many years ago, that was something I saw and would have struggled to deal with when I worked clinically. And now it was so exciting to be involved with this network, to be able to look at the type of interventions that clinicians can provide in maternity and in community services. And central to that in our cost action was the involvement of service user representatives. So they became involved from the very outset of the cost action to remind us all of the importance of women's voices shaping and being involved through all of the journey around developing research questions. Um, and that was what really attracted me to this cost action, was the interdisciplinarity and the commitment of the researchers to put the women at the centre of the research process.
So over these perhaps a little more than 3 years now, being involved in this kind of work, what was the understanding or the knowledge that has been gained? What are the main findings?
So there really has been quite quite a journey over the past 3 to 4 years, and I suppose it's difficult to define it just in one core area. If I was to mention the training schools, Olga, they focused on three key areas. One was the provision of information and education around the whole area of trauma informed care and trauma sensitive and trauma responsive care. So that was something that the participants were keen to build knowledge in and to share with different disciplines. And I think that is growing in terms of an output. The focus on the service culture of maternity care is evolving, how it is so important to humanize maternity care so as not to cause harm, and how then that can be operationalized. In terms of more other areas and arenas, our second training school focused on the whole area of epigenetics, which really was very new for me as a midwife. I developed a whole new knowledge base and skill base around the language of epigenetics and that transference of intergenerational trauma, and how prevention is so important. So as you know, from a health promotion and a preventative perspective, to prevent that transmission of trauma from generation to generation or onto the baby and to the new and emerging family. And our last training school then focused on the whole area of longitudinal data. And, so there was, again, it was highly scientific, using statistical packages such as R. And again, there was lots of, I suppose, emerging and doctoral researchers developing capacity in this area, which is really very exciting and innovative. And so I can see, the outputs will grow over very many years in relation to the treatment, the prevention of birth-related trauma.
So actually, Sylvia, I hear that there is a gap that you observed that existed in this midwifery world from all health professionals present at the moment of childbirth, and this gap is related with the knowledge about specific parameters or factors which can be key factors for the well-being of the people involved and the future generations. So you focused on trying to respond and do as much as possible on given or creating as much knowledge and translate this knowledge into schools or educational material so that the professionals can benefit from that. And I also hear that there is another need which has been spotted, and this is that the health professionals need to have transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary support in terms of skills and knowledge. And we are moving in an era when just knowing midwifery the way we learned it 20 years ago, 30 years ago, perhaps is not enough. Is that so?
Indeed, absolutely. I think the transdisciplinary approach to research on this project really helped us to highlight where those gaps were in terms of, you know, one working group I'm involved in was looking at the dimensions around the birth experience and how little is still known, despite much research in the area. And so identifying those gaps is pivotal to, high quality reviews being undertaken to fill those gaps and then highlight, the interventions, the preventative approaches that clinicians should be taking to augment the birth experience, because it is a pivotal moment in a woman's and a family's life, a pregnancy and the birth experience. So that would have been one area. Another area I was involved in working with Professor Jill Thompson was mapping the trauma services in various countries internationally. And so you could see huge disparities in different countries by adopting a mapping approach to the services and even to the understanding of what is defined and the definitions of birth trauma. Some countries had no services, and other countries had, minimal or patchy services. And so, again, there is an inequity in that, and that's part of being able to, support the development of good policy in this area to see where services are developed, to see where there are leaders in this area, and to see where there are gaps. So I think from a European perspective, this has been very exciting to look at how the research has been so targeted, to produce good, not just high quality research, but research that is impactful from a policy perspective and a practice perspective.
And Sylvia, since you have activated all your uh, skills and all your knowledge in this field, can you share at least 2, 3 main points that each of us could take and use in our own everyday experiences, researchers, or academia?
So if I was to have 3 take-home messages for researchers, it would be to consider the perspective of other disciplines and to talk to and listen to, all professionals when you're honing a research question. Don't stay in a silo of your own discipline. Um, for me, I think it has been pivotal to have the service users, so to have women and birthing people involved in shaping the research. And I think, there is a focus. Funders do talk about patient and public involvement, that PPI element. I think that's critically important because often as whether we're academics, whether we're clinicians, we can have our own lens and our own perspective, but by listening to the service user, um, they may identify very critical and key elements related to birth-related trauma. And I suppose the third key message really is that despite all that we have learnt over the past number of years, we we're stronger together as a research community. We have overcome the challenge of COVID, and that has, you know, been a great learning curve. It has been stressful. It has been challenging, um, but it just goes to show you that, research that is joined up and that is crossing countries, crossing boundaries, crossing disciplines, it is exciting and innovative. And I'm very, very, I think I look forward to the future where the birth experience really is one where we can look back in time and say that devotion, that cost action CA1, A211 has been very impactful in this arena.
So it is expand, and then there is power in unity.
Absolutely, yes.
Good. And now bringing our attention to younger researchers, early stage researchers, how can they be supported in order to build a sustaining network of um, within this community of birth-related trauma? What are some uh, guidelines, if we could use this word, which could help them achieve this goal?
So in the as a result of the training schools, we have had three MOOCs developed. Many of these young researchers are coming from laboratories, are coming from research labs with established professors of research. So it is about growing capacity in this area, and it is about, for many years, I think the whole area of women's health was neglected, and so it has firmly placed, the research in the area of birth and maternity care on the agenda in Europe and internationally. So, in terms of developing that forward, I think this is an exciting time for researchers. And I see many of the young early career researchers and doctoral students uh, having the opportunity to come and attend meetings, having the opportunity to attend the training schools. Uh, I have no doubt that this will build and develop. They have had the opportunity to network with leaders in the global community of research in perinatal mental health and birth related trauma. So I think it's like, from small acorns, large oak trees grow. I think it is a ripple that will expand and grow and develop into the future.
So it is get the opportunity, get to know about the opportunity, then bring this opportunity to yourself, then try to spot the key experts in the field, and then see how you can network and learn from them as this theme is growing, and it is now the time for us to do it.
Yes, and I would always say, ask for assistance and help along the way, because it has been a most cooperative, supportive community of researchers to have been involved with, and a very respectful. So, going in and not have you're not expected to have all of the knowledge, but by attending webinars, by attending training schools, network meetings, linking in with the wide dissemination information that has been provided over the last number of years, that has been pivotal, I believe, to the advancement of the next generation of successful researchers in this area.
You have told us about how you felt, or how the benefits that you got as being also a part of one of the training schools, at least I think all of them, as you were the leader of the training school. Have you have you got the narratives of other trainees? What have they commented as benefits that they got out of the training schools?
Um, so first of all, the opportunity to meet and to learn from the best in terms of the most excellent of educators and researchers was very exciting. many of the participants spoke about the practical skills that they have developed. So actually having case studies to work on. Many participants liked the interdisciplinarity, so actually working in small group work. So it was collaborative. It was something that built on over the course of the training school, the 3 days. And it was something they were able to take away and practice. We had many journal clubs. They would have run during primarily the second and third training school, and they were very well evaluated by participants. They really liked the approach of using a paper and drilling down then. And so it didn't expose people who were learners, irrespective of your discipline. It was a very respectful and a very collaborative process to be in. I found, being a midwife, I wouldn't have had all of those access to that language and terminology. So it was certainly educational. I have expanded my knowledge base in this area, and again, the skills of practicing the use of statistical packages, of looking at longitudinal data, that was something really new for me. And it broke down the mystery, and actually has, I suppose, given me a lot of confidence in the knowledge base I had already, but also a lot of excitement about what could come next and what research questions that we need to answer together as a research community.
Right. So it is really taking you to another step in the inspiration world of doing or wanting or wishing to do more in the field. Are there any challenges that remain?
Well, we certainly were challenged by COVID during the process, and I think as a research community, we overcame that very successfully by harnessing technology. And to that aim, I think one of the challenges going forward now is to spread the message and to disseminate widely the output, because it is not sufficient, just, in 2023, just to have published papers. It is about getting that message to policymakers, getting that message across to the health services and maternity services and healthcare providers and, policymakers. So, to that end, the dissemination and the communications group have done great work. They're developing podcasts. The website has been vital to that process of dissemination. But we're also looking at new tech, the use of social media for social good. So having that Instagram account, having Twitter, and looking at the data analytics. And I think that is something that maybe not all researchers are necessarily very strong at science communication, but it's something we have focused on and are growing and developing, and realize that in terms of closing the loop or the circle of research, that the dissemination is just so vitally important.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned the importance of the policymakers and the decision makers and how the message is important to reach them. Uh, would you um, would you like to uh, express or to speak what is a slogan, a very catchy phrase that could be communicated to the policymakers to make them really turn their head and listen or look at the challenge that is in the field now?
Um, I think I'm thinking on the spot now, but in terms of birth-related trauma, I think a message is that it impacts future generations. It affects family life. It impacts um, individual psychological well-being. So that is a key message: is that prevention of birth-related trauma is essential to preserve the health and well-being of future generations.
So actually, I am trying to rephrase it. Could be um, a healthy birth today
Mm-hmm.
uh, makes healthy generations for the future to come. Something like
It
this.
That sounds, yeah, absolutely. That is really part of this message, isn't it? About um, with making, enabling birth and enabling birth to be a good experience. It leaves a long-lasting impact on a new family. Um, and I think that is key to what we've been very unified, irrespective of our disciplines, whether we're psychologists, midwives, obstetricians, economists. We've all come together to work to that end, to make things better for the future generations.
Actually, as you round it now, a birth-related trauma is not a thing that a midwife or a doula or an obstetrician will have to look at and do something because it is important. But uh, birth-related trauma affects the lives of all people and impacts our civilization, our health, our relations. So it is connected with peace and the sustainability of life on our planet.
Yes, and that is an important point you raise in terms of sustainability. So hopefully this cost action has been a growing and developing collaboration, and one that is sustainable into the future. And I have no doubt that it will be, because the commitment of the researchers, the innovation I have seen, development of research questions to make things better. So that screening processes to measure and look at the scientific merit. If you look at some of the um, STSMs that have happened, like to look at some of the research questions that are growing and developing and being answered, it is really exciting about the sustainability piece for future generations, I believe.
So, is there anything else you would like to add before we bring it to a closure?
Um, um, so in terms of birth related trauma, one of the other key findings really has been about preventing the intergenerational transmission of trauma through biomedical and epigenetic research. And we have attempted in this cost action to link with policymakers, and also uh, through European institutions around the importance of human rights in childbirth. And that is also a very important message about birth-related trauma, is that in many countries, women's and birthing families, their human rights are impacted during the childbearing process. And that is something that was also central to this cost action, was to have a human rights lens and to push for advancement of the rights of women and families in maternity care.
Right, brilliant. So this human right element is something we need to respect and bear in mind whatever we do. So,
Yes, I think it is important that it isn't just lawyers, or it isn't just human rights advocates, but that actually each of us in our respective disciplines have a focus on a standard and a quality of service that women and families can expect to receive in their countries. And so that is very much linked with the voice of the women. And our service users reminded us of that during many of our meetings. And I suppose it's just one of the messages I want to get across here today, is that the researchers were very mindful of the very ethical challenges that are posed. COVID indeed was very difficult in terms of the restrictions that were placed on women. And some countries, the standards maybe are still developing around treatment and in maternity care. So just to mention that point to our listeners today.
Thank you, Sylvia, for adding high impact to this short term, in terms of the length of time of humanity, research work done in our action. Thank you very much for this short-term, high-impact discussion.
Thank you, Olga. It was my great pleasure. Thank you.